featuring FNU Central versus FNU Western. The topic for this debate session is: should political parties in Fiji be required to reserve seats or quotas for women and youth? I repeat, should political parties in Fiji be required to reserve seats or quotas for women and youth? I now invite the teams from the Western and Central to please come up. The topic highlights an important question in Fiji's democratic journey, the inclusion of women and youth in political decision making. Should political parties be required to reserve seats or quotas to ensure diversity and fair representation? Let's hear what our debaters have to say today. On the affirmative side, we have Team FNU Western, and on the negative side, we have Team FNU Central. Please give another round of applause to the final debaters for today. I now invite the first speaker from the affirmative side. Thank you.
The chief guest, Director of Academic Learning and Teaching, the chief organizers, Dialogue Fiji, honorable judges, fellow debaters. Let me repeat that, fellow debaters, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon to you all. Team Natambua, FNU, is here today to convince you all that Fiji's political parties must be required to reserve seats or quotas for women and youth. Before I proceed any further, I will introduce our team line, discuss our team split, define the key terms, and discuss my substantive arguments with compelling arguments about providing quotas for women and men, for women and youth in political parties. Our team line is inclusion, not exclusion. This will end exclusion and male dominance in Fiji's politics and parliament, ensuring a more accurate representation of the country's minority groups. As the first speaker of the affirmative team, I will lay the foundational basis for our team's arguments by connecting Fiji's demographics to the need for quotas of minority groups. Speaker 2, Ratu Chesinambunambuno, will expound on overcoming systematic barriers and economic benefits of mandating quotas. The third speaker, who is our wonderful team whip, Selina Lockington, will rebut the opposition's arguments and sum up our points. Let me start by defining our key terms. The Oxford Advanced Dictionary defines quota as a system that sets a minimum number of percentage of seats or positions to be held by the members of a specific group to ensure their representation in decision-making. The Ministry of Youth and Sports Fiji defines youth as anyone between the ages of 15 and 35. For the purpose of this debate, our team will employ this definition of youth. My first point lays the logical groundwork for the introduction of quotas for women and youth in Fiji politics. The composition of parliamentarians should be directly proportionate to the demographics of the minority groups in Fiji. The Bureau of Statistics Census 2017 released the following figures concerning the 2017 census. The total population, 884,887. Percentage of youths, 16.7. Percentage of women, 49.9. And percentage of men, 50.7. When you do the math, the total percentage of youth and women counted in Fiji's last census was 66.6%. That's 2/3 of Fiji's population. The discrepancy has to do with the age ranges of women and youths. Now let me take you to the composition of Fiji's current parliament. Youth, 2, 3.6%. Women, 5, that's 9.9%. And men, 48, 87.27%. The total composition of youth and women in Fiji's parliament is 7, or 13.5%, as opposed to 66% of Fiji's total population at the last count. The discrepancy is staggering. Men have been making decisions that impact women and youth for far too long. It is time to change this. Given the conservative mindsets that oppose changes in our political landscape, the cultural and traditional barriers that hinder the minority groups from taking on national leadership roles in Fiji, a surefire way of ensuring a more equal representation of women and youth in Fiji. Politics is to mandate a quota system in all political parties and parliament. My team proposes a quota of 10% of 5 parliamentary seats for youths and 20% or 16 parliamentary seats for women. This will mean 21 parliamentary seats for youth and women in Fiji's parliament. This will account for 38% of Fiji's total parliamentary seats, which will be a huge improvement on the current measly 13.5%. Fiji's Deputy Prime Minister Manoa Kamikamica, in a workshop in Suva organized by Dialogue Fiji in collaboration with Emily's List Australia, November 2024, highlighted the decline of women representation in Parliament over the last two elections. As a result, he made a call for a quota system to increase women's representation in Parliament. Linda Tambuya, one of the 5 female parliamentarians, said political parties need to step up and guarantee candidacy for women in Fiji. That was taken from the Fiji Sun, dated as 24 July 2024. My second point is that reserving quotas for women in political parties is not a new thing. This practice is a universal one. According to International IDEA, International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance, 2025, 67 countries have set aside quotas for women in their national parliaments and political parties. This means that 38% of the countries of the world have reserved quotas for their women. A striking omission is that no countries from the South Pacific, not including New Zealand or Australia, have set aside quotas for their women, let alone youth. According to ResearchGate 2018, only 8 countries in the world have reserved quotas for their youth in their national parliaments. They are Rwanda, Morocco, Uganda, Egypt, Kyrgyzstan, Tunisia, Gabon, and Kenya, with quotas ranging 1% to 20%. Let's just think or imagine for a while now. If Fiji were to mandate a quota for youth in parliament, we would be the first country in the Pacific to do so. Fiji could then be looked as a beacon of hope that promotes the participation of the young in its national politics. According to UN Women 2025, at the current rate of progress, gender parity in national legislative bodies will not be achieved until 2063. This highlights the glaring need for Fiji to mandate quotas for its youth and women in parliament. The increased presence of women and youth in our political parties and parliament will change the dynamics of leadership in Fiji. Women will be able to directly interact with their female counterparts from the grassroots upwards, and who will understand youth problems better than youth leaders. I reiterate our team line: inclusion, not exclusion. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I invite the first speaker from the negative side.
Honorable judges, worthy opponents, respected timekeepers, moderators, attentive audience. Good afternoon. As the first speaker of my team, I'll begin with refutation. Our second speaker will give the rationale of refutation, and our third speaker will offer robust rebuttals. There's a story my mother used to tell me about a mango tree she planted when she was 16. It grew slowly. For years, it gave nothing. She watered it, protected it from storms, but still it stood quiet. Until one year, it bloomed, not because someone forced it, but because it was ready. Ladies and gentlemen, today's debate is not about mango tree, it's about growth. Because the question before us asks, whether Fiji should force political parties to reserve seats or quotas for women and youth. And while the idea sounds just noble, even modern, it risks mistaking forced growth for true progress. Now imagine a political party, a young woman, namely Mary, with fire in her voice and vision in her heart. She didn't wait for a quota to speak. She didn't need a reserved seat to lead. She earned her place. Not because she was young, not because she was a female, but because she was capable. Now imagine in a quota-based system telling Mere, you're here because we had to include you, not because you were the best, but because the law said so. That's not empowerment, that's tokenism. And that, dear judges, is the danger of quota. Let's be honest, representation without respect is just decoration. When a woman or youth enters parliament through a quota, the whisper follows. She's only there because the law required. That's not empowerment, that's humiliation dressed in progress. Opposition MP Honorable Ketan Lal warned about this very thing at the Fiji Law Reform Commission hearing on the 11th of April 2025. Reserving seats may look progressive, but it risks being tokenistic. If the purpose of democracy is to earn people's trust, then reserved seats remove the very challenge that makes leadership meaningful. Because if you ever had to fight for your place, you never know the strength it takes to hold it. We, the Negative team, stand firmly against the motion, not because we don't want more women or youth in parliament, but because we believe that genuine empowerment can't be planted by decree. It must grow from root, not rules. We are told that quotas will uplift women and youth, but I ask you, uplift them to what? To a seat they didn't fight for? To a title that whispers, you're here because we had let you in? Quotas don't build leaders, they build labels. And labels, my friends, are the enemies of true equality. According to Fiji News, established in April 13, 2025, Riddhi Damodar, former General Secretary of the People's Democratic Party, said it best. Systematic change, not quotas, is a key to women's representation. Quotas create present, but not necessarily power. Quotas ensure representation. Yes, they ensure presence, but not power. I repeat, not power. They ensure numbers, but not nuance. We don't need symbolic seats. We need systematic change. Democracy was never meant to be a pie that we cut into equal slices for each group. It is meant to be a table where everyone, no matter their age or gender, can sit and have a say. When we start assigning chairs, these 10 for women, those 3 for youth, we turn the tables into a seating chart. Paul Morrell, General Secretary of the Kingdom Future Party, said in the Fiji Times on the 12th of April 2025, seats should be earned, not handed out by gender. He's not denying equality. He's defending fairness, the right of every citizen to compete on equal ground without the label of quota candidate showing their evidence. Because a parliament divided by gender or age lines stops being a mirror of the nation, it becomes a mosaic categories, and Fiji deserves better than that. The Fiji women's rights movement has repeatedly highlighted that women face barriers, financial, cultural, and social. But none of those are solved by quotas. Let me be clear. Exclusion is real, but quotas are not the cure. They are the band-aid on the broken system. True inclusion comes from breaking barriers, not from ticking the boxes. Take the recent workshop in Suva, which was mentioned by the affirmative, organized by Dialogue Fiji and Ambly List Australia. It trained prospective women and youth candidates not by handing them seats, but by building their capacity. If we want to see more women and youth in politics, let's make it possible, not automatic. Fund their campaigns, train them in policy and leadership, create friendly workplace in parliament. Don't hand them chairs, hand them a ladder. We are not here to play politics with identity. We are here to build a nation where every voice is rise, not because it was placed, but because it was powerful. They say quotas work in other countries. Yes, so do dictatorship, but we don't copy them. Fiji isn't a cut and paste nation. We don't need important solution with foreign accents. We need homegrown leadership, not policy that looks good on paper. The opponents have thrown few statistics on creating balance in the parliamentary seats. Balance? This isn't a seesaw at Albert Park. Politics isn't making sure everyone gets a turn. It's about making sure the best leads the way. If we keep balancing for the sake of fairness, we'll end up with a parliament that looks like a kindergarten roster. One of each, just to keep the parents happy. So no, we are not against equality. We are for authentic equality. I want my daughters and my son to believe they can enter parliament, not because of who they are, but because what they've done. I want them to earn their place through service, sacrifice, and skill, not through a law that assumed they couldn't. So yes, let's fight for women and youth. Let's fight hard, but let's do it the right way by fixing the barriers, not bending the ballot. To the women and youth of Fiji, don't settle for reserved seat. Demand open doors. Don't be boxed in by quotas. Break out with courage. Don't let the law define your worth. Let your work do that. Because in the end, true empowerment is not given, it is earned. So I say no to quotas, yes to merit, no to reservation, yes to revolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I invite the second speaker from the affirmative team.
A democracy that silences its women and sidelines its youth is a democracy that walks on one leg, unbalanced, unstable, and uncertain of its future. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Or as we say in the friendly West, Dolabinariki. As the second speaker for the affirmative team, I stand firm in supporting the motion that political parties in Fiji should reserve seats for women and youth. To translate it into the Tauke dialect, me maroroi ana vale ni boselawa na intambenta me membaletira na marama kena itambangwane. Our team believes that reserving seats is not about favoritism. It's about fairness, inclusion, and effective representation, and reiterates our team line, inclusion, not exclusion. In the Tauke dialect, it says, Okati, sengani bakatambui. As mentioned by our first speaker, that inclusion, not exclusion, will end male dominance in Fiji's politics and parliament, ensuring a more accurate representation of the country's minority groups. Before I begin my substantive arguments, let me rebut the opposition argument. The first point that I'd like to rebut is tokenism. You cannot prove yourself without being given a seat. Even if Sainimere faces prejudice, Sainimere has the seat because of quota, and now she has a chance to prove herself. Second is about the Honorable Kitan Lal. Almost every day when we check into our Facebook pages, the Honorable Kitan Lal is the only member of parliament who will always fight for youth participation in politics. Third, balance of power. If there shouldn't be any women and youth participating in politics, how will we get to hear the voices of women and youth? Allow me to present my arguments. Now, let me build on that foundation that our first speaker has laid. Women and youth face deep-rooted barriers. Cultural norms discourage women from entering politics. Financial inequality limits young and female candidates. Party gatekeeping, where senior male elites decide nominations, means youth and women rarely even get a chance. Firstly, women and youth should be allowed reserve quotas in parliament because these groups have long faced systematic barriers that prevent equal participation in political decision-making. Structural inequalities, cultural norms, and historical exclusion have limited their access to leadership roles and policy influence. Quotas provide a necessary corrective measure, not as a privilege, but as a tool for fairness and balance. By guaranteeing representation, quotas help dismantle the entrenched biases that keep politics dominated by older male elites. Moreover, women and young people bring fresh perspectives, innovative ideas, and lived experiences that make policies more inclusive and reflective of society's full diversity. Ensuring their presence in parliament is not just about equity, it's about strengthening democracy itself. These are systematic problems, and systematic problems require systematic solutions. Reserving seats is not a handout. It's a corrective measure that levels the playing field. The Fiji Law Reform Commission, dated 11th April 2025, released the following article titled, Fiji Women's Rights Movement and Fiji Women's Crisis Center calls for 30% of seats to be reserved in parliament, and stated the following. The article reported the following: the decline in political representation of women in the 3 national elections under the current electoral system is an embarrassment, and cultural, social, economic, and political barriers that continue to block women's political empowerment, making temporary special measures not just beneficial, but absolutely necessary. We've seen this work in countries like Rwanda, where reserve seats help women achieve over 60% representation in parliament, the highest in the world. Rwanda stands as one of the clearest examples of how women political representation can drive national progress. After the 1994 genocide, Rwanda adopted gender quotas that reserved 30% of its parliamentary seats for women. Today, Rwanda has the highest percentage of women in parliament in the world, with women holding over 61% of seats. This unprecedented representation has directly influenced the nation's recovery and development. Female MPs have been central to passing progressive laws on gender-based violence, land inheritance rights, education, and healthcare reforms that have improved equality, reduced poverty, and strengthened social stability. Studies by the World Bank and United Nations Women link Rwanda's gender-inclusive governance to faster economic growth, higher school enrollment rates for girls, and stronger community trust in the government's institutions. Rwanda's experience shows that empowering women through reserve quotas does not just correct inequality, it actively fuels national resilience, innovation, and prosperity. Secondly, representation improves policy outcomes. Evidence shows that diverse parliaments produce better governance. Women leaders are often more likely to champion education, healthcare, and family welfare policies. Youth leaders bring energy, innovation, and digital literacy, essential in today's fast-changing world. Reserve quotas for women and youth improve policy making by ensuring that diverse voices and experiences shapes the laws and decisions that affect everyone. When parliament includes people from different genders and age groups, policies become more holistic, addressing a wider range of social, economic, and community issues. Women often prioritize policies related to healthcare, education, and family welfare, while youth bring energy, innovation, and forward-thinking solutions to emerging challenges like technology, climate change, and employment. This diversity of the thoughts lead to more balanced, practical, and sustainable outcomes. By including those who traditionally been excluded, reserved quotas create a policy-making process that is not only more representative, but also more responsive to the real needs of society. For example, in New Zealand, the inclusion of young and female MPs has led to progressive climate and social reforms that directly respond to our younger generation's concern. Closer to home, when Honorable Linda Tambuya and Honorable Lenora Ngerengere Tambuya entered Fiji's parliament, debates around gender-based violence, youth employment, and online safety gained visibility. Reserving seats ensured such perspectives are not the exception, they become the norm. Ladies and gentlemen, democracy is not complete until all voices are heard. Reserving seats for women and youth is not charity, it's justice. It's not about dividing society, it's about building a fairer one. Because when women rise, family rise. When youth lead, the future strengthens. So let's stop treating representation as a favor and start treating it as a right. Political parties must reserve seats for women and youth because we, the affirmative, advocate for inclusion, not exclusion. Thank you.
Thank you. I now invite the second speaker from the negative side.
In my village in Lau, I remember sitting beside my mbumbu in the dim light of our kerosene lamp. She would tell me, Makumbungu, she would tell me stories of the days when women in our village were rarely allowed to speak in village meetings. But she never stopped trying. She'd say, Dona singa and narongode na domongo. One day, my voice shall be heard. She didn't have a fancy title or a reserved seat. She had courage. She spoke up in village gatherings, stood for the truth. She taught my mother that leadership is not given, it is earned. When we talk about setting aside seats for women and youth in politics, I think of my grandmother, who didn't need a quota to be respected. She earned it through strength, wisdom, and heart. Of course, ladies and gentlemen, we, the negative side, agree that women represent less than 10% of the seats in parliament. This is according to the Inter-Parliamentary Union. Youth representation is even lower, with under 10% of elected leaders under the age of 35. These numbers show the problem, but quotas alone don't fix it. We, the negative side, say, fix the roots, no quota. Quotas are a quick coat of paint, masking the deeper barriers, which are limited access to funding, cultural expectation that discourage young and female participation, and a lack of political mentoring programs. According to recent studies by the Fiji Women's Rights Movement in 2022, it stated that over 60% of women report facing obstacles related to cultural norms and family responsibilities that limits their political involvement. Women and youth in Fiji deserves more than just reserved seats. They deserve strong roots, real support, equal opportunities, and the chance to grow into leadership on their own merit. Real leadership cannot be handed out as favors. It must be earned through courage, resilience, and hard work. If we settle for quotas, ladies and gentlemen, we risk turning future leaders into tokens, their legitimacy questioned before they even begin. And we owe it to Fiji, ladies and gentlemen, to every woman and every young person to break down the barriers, nourish the roots, and build a political system where leadership truly grows. Because when the roots are strong, ladies and gentlemen, only then the whole tree can rise. Why do we say that quotas should not be introduced in Fiji? Because quotas are a superficial fix that don't address the root causes of underrepresentation. Reserving seats masks the deeper systemic barriers that prevent women and youth from participating fully in politics. These include cultural norms, financial constraints, limited access to political networks, and lack of leadership and development opportunities. The Inter-Parliamentary Union report in 2023 shows that while women hold less than 10% of parliamentary seats in Fiji, this low figure is due to these underlying issues rather than a lack of opportunity alone. A 2019 United Nations Development Program report emphasizes that access to campaign finance and political training programs are critical factors influencing women's political success globally, far more than quota system alone. Quotas don't guarantee better representation. They only guarantee numbers, ladies and gentlemen. Putting someone in a seat simply because they satisfy a quota, such with their gender or because of their age, does not ensure that they have the power, the voice, or support to represent their communities in a meaningful way. Representation is not just being present. It's being able to speak freely and influence decision-making, bring real changes in terms of policy, legislation, community outcomes, hold power, not just occupy a title. When representation is reduced to numbers, ladies and gentlemen, what often happens is tokenism. The person is there in name, but the ability to make change is limited by party politics, lack of resources, or simply being marginalized within the institution. According to the United Nations Women in 2021, they did studies in India and Kenya. And it showed that some quota candidates had limited political independence or impact, often controlled by senior party members. Ladies and gentlemen, a seat at the table means nothing if you're allowed to speak, or worse, if you're only there to make the table look good. Quotas can also create complacency and reduce motivation to address real challenges, ladies and gentlemen. When political parties rely on quotas to fill seats, they may neglect investing in the real work needed to nurture capable women and youth candidates. This reliance risks complacency and stalls long-term cultural and institutional reforms that would organically increase participation. A 2018 study in the European Journal of Political Research found that quotas sometimes lead parties to tick boxes without improving the actual political empowerment or capacity of women and youth. And according to Fiji's 2021 governance report, parties that invested in candidate development without quota pressure show more sustainable increase in female and youth candidates over time. This is what Fiji needs, ladies and gentlemen. I now want to take this time to rebuttal some of the points that was raised by the affirmative side. They said that the other countries has used quota successfully and we should follow. Two countries that they brought up was Rwanda and New Zealand. Yes, Rwanda does have quotas, and yes, it shows that women hold a lot of seats in parliament, but we need to take into consideration the circumstances in which quota system came up in Rwanda. The quota system in Rwanda came after the Rwandan genocide, where more than 800,000 of Rwandans died. This is when Rwanda is united. In Fiji, we are not united. We need more education. We need more literacy program of political involvement. That is what Fiji needs. They also brought up New Zealand, which they call a success story. Ladies and gentlemen, New Zealand has no mandatory quotas. Women there now make up 50% of parliaments because of education, social progress, and cultural change, not because seats were handed out. So instead of copying foreign system, Fiji should strengthen leadership training, education, and access to politics. We don't need imitation. We need innovation that fits our own culture and democracy. Just like you, I want to see the day when our women and youth don't just sit at the table, but lead the conversation, shape the future, and carry Fiji forward with their own vision and strength. So I ask you today, don't settle for empty numbers. Don't settle for hollow victories. Instead, stand for a Fiji where every woman, every young person has the chance to fight their place and win it with honor. Because when leadership is earned, it is unstoppable. And when leadership is earned, Fiji becomes more than just a nation, it becomes a legacy. Vinaka.
Now invite the final speaker from the affirmative side.
Honorable judges, my fellow debaters, ladies and gentlemen. We've heard a debate that isn't just about numbers or seats. It's about who gets to sit at the table of power. It's about whether half our nation, women and youth, continue to stand at the door waiting to be heard, or whether we finally make room for them inside. From the very start, our team has stood firmly on the one principle: true democracy is built on inclusion, not exclusion. And that is exactly what quotas achieve. I will sum up our substantive arguments and then proceed to rebut the opposition's claims. Our first speaker laid the foundation showing the glaring discrepancy when it comes to representation of women and youth in parliament. I reiterate these figures. 2 when it comes to youth, and 5 when it comes to women. That gives us 9.9% representation for women and 3.6% representation for youth. And men have a staggering 87.27% of representation in parliament. She also highlighted how having a reserved quota for women and youth is not a new thing, and there are currently 69 countries who employ this practice. My second speaker highlighted how women and youth face systemic barriers like financial and cultural norms when it comes to being elected into parliament, and how reservation quotas eliminates this. He also highlighted that the representation of women and youth in parliament brings better policy outcomes, like who better to speak for the youth than the youth. Now let me turn to what the opposition has said. Speaker 1 of the negative team spoke about growth, about not forcing growth. Our women and youth have waited centuries. It seems like nothing has been growing. How long do they have to wait? How long does my son have to wait before he will be able to have a voice in parliament? Speaker 1 also pointed out that democracy was not meant to be a sitting chart or a pie to be equally divided. And she said that she gave some very pretty arguments about empowering people, training them. Tell me, how long will this take? Like I said, how long will my son have to wait? These are not just mere numbers. These numbers represent our very reality. How long does he have to wait before all these empowerment tools work and he is able to have a seat in parliament? According to our figures that our learned opposition referred to, it will be decades before this opportunity arises for him. Their speaker 2 said that quota forces the voice of women and youth. Now let me address the women here sitting before me. If you were given the chance to speak, if you were given the chance to voice your opinion, would you feel compelled or forced, like our learned opposition has said? Or would you, given this chance, voice the long silenced opinions that you have carried inside of you? Let's all ponder that for a minute. They also brought out the point of tokenism. And I just want to point out that they said this a couple of times. But like we said, tokenism is not just, let me rephrase that, quotas is not just tokenism. It is giving a voice to the voiceless, to women and youth. Like our numbers have said, representation is so very poor. We must give them that voice to speak out. They spoke up, they said, they referred to our points of bringing up Rwanda. They said that should we just copy them? We didn't say that we were going to copy them or just use a cut and paste. We gave you the percentage of quotas that fits our countries. They also said that New Zealand does not have quotas. We didn't say anything like that. We just pointed out the fact that they have women and youth in their parliament and that their representation has helped shape policies like addressing issues like media, drugs, about climate change. So that is what that was the point that we were bringing up. And ladies and gentlemen, once again, we thank you for your time, and we leave you again with our team line: inclusion, not exclusion.
Thank you. I now invite the panel speaker from the negative side.
Ladies and gentlemen, today we rise not to deny the brilliance, strength, or potential of our women and youth, but to defend that they deserve more than symbolic seats. They deserve earned seats. Our team stands for empowerment, not entitlement. We believe that true progress for women and youth in Fiji is not achieved by setting numerical limits, but by removing the real barriers that prevent them from rising. Because a seat handed out is temporary, but a seat earned is transformational. Fiji's women and youth are not short of ability. They are short of opportunities. And those opportunities cannot be built on political quotas alone. Let's look at our reality. According to the Fiji Bureau of Statistics in 2023, women make up almost 49% of our population, and young people under 35 represent nearly 60%. Yet this group remain underrepresented not because they lack ambition, but because politics in Fiji has become expensive, elitist, and disconnected. Quotas do not solve that. They merely decorate the surface. They do not repair the system underneath. Take, for instance, the 2022 general election. 10 women were elected to parliament, making up 20% of all members of parliament. That's the highest proportion in Fiji's history, and that was achieved without quotas. This shows that progress is already happening. When we impose quotas, we risk sending the message that women and youth need special permission to lead, that their success is conditional on pity, not merit. This undermines the very equality we are trying to protect. True equality is not when we give someone a seat. It's when we make the path to the seat fair for everyone. The opponent claims that quotas will fix inequality. Fix inequality? That's like saying a duct tape will fix a sinking boat. Sure, it looks like a solution until you realize the leak is cultural, educational, and systemic. Quotas are the political equivalent of slapping a "you tried" sticker on a broken system and calling it progress. Our 2020 World Bank policy paper found that in countries with legal quotas, many quota-selected members of parliament followed party elite directives rather than representing independent voices, showing surface diversity, not substantive representation. Diversity imposed by law can create a parliament full of faces, not voices. Dear audience, I want you to imagine a young woman, bold, intelligent, passionate about her people. A young man from a rural village eager to change his community. Now imagine you telling them, you are here because the law said we needed your age or your gender. Would that fill them with pride? Or would it leave them wondering if their seat was theirs? Fiji's democracy is still young, still growing. It needs representation born out of respect and readiness, not regulations. Our women and youth must rise because they have proven their worth, not because they were pre-selected to fill a quota. Ladies and gentlemen, let us not create a democracy of numbers, but a democracy of worthiness, equality, and vision. Let our leaders, young and old, men and women, earn their place equally by what box, not because the box they tick, but by what future they can build. Vinaka.
Hey, what a remarkable showcase of intellectual preparation and confidence. Thank you to both the teams. Thank you, everyone. While we're waiting for the results, now I invite the judges to share their feedback regarding the debaters.
I'll begin with the second runner-up with 241 points, Team North. Second runner-up. Congratulations, team. The first runner-up with 270 points, Team Central. And with 278 points, Team West. Congratulations.